were you born on Krypton and then your parents sent you here and then you came to deliver true justice in the American? How did Noah become Noah? What in the hell? How did it happen?
I can't believe you guessed correctly that I was born on Krypton.
Oh, well.
Yeah, that's crazy. And the story
Good night,
everybody. I have rather a unique story for sort of the. Hold on one second. Mm-hmm. My wife was giving me coffee. I forgot to make it before this in my awesome Midwestern Marx mug. So
there you go.
I can't live without coffee. It's Anyway, so most people these days, especially in this resurgence of communism going on with reproletarianization, most people got radicalized around the Bernie Sanders movement and the failure of that. I was sort of re-radicalized by this. My grandparents are from the Soviet Union. My grandfather is Georgian and my grandmother is Kazakh. She's a Tatar. So they moved here basically they weren't political or anything. They loved the communists, don't get me wrong. I mean, everybody pretty much did. They brought industrialization, trade, etc. to poor villages that had never had it before. They moved here basically to have my dad in a more peaceful environment. There were fascist uprisings, there was counter-revolution, etc. And so they moved here. So I grew up in a house where my dad was sort of the product of people who liked communism and were American immigrants. My dad was a union leader throughout his life. He worked in the manufacturing industry. He worked for Ford for a long time. And so I sort of grew up around the class struggle. When I was late teens, maybe, I hit a really rebellious patch, and everything I'd sort of learned about Marxism, I decided was stupid. My parents knew nothing, right? Like most teenagers do. I told my dad I was an anarchist and I moved to Los Angeles, right? That did not work out. I played music for a long time and all that kind of stuff. And I ended up moving back to the good old Midwest. And around the time, at the Midwestern Marx Institute, part of our theory that we're creating, there's a large sort of section of this we call reproletarianization. And this is basically the Marxist view in our view, actually. Sorry, use the word view twice. The Marxist view of the death of the American middle class. And this reproletarianization causes just waves of radicalism. And that really inspired me. Seeing people like Eddie and Carlos just building this from nothing really inspires me. Seeing the Communist Party rebuilding inspires me. Seeing you and the guys at RBN, all of this just inspires me. And it made me sort of ashamed that I had knowledge and the ability to try to do something, and I wasn't doing anything with it. So it's funny, I contacted Carlos to ask him if he was accepting, freelance writers and things like this. And he was like, that's really strange. Eddie and I were talking, and just from your online presence, we really wanted you to come work with us. So that's how I joined that. I'm also a member of the Communist Party. And yeah, I organized in my community forever. As soon as I moved back to Cleveland, I got active locally to try to help. And that's my life.
Wow. So you had kind of a base already, from your grandparents and your father being part of a union. I mean, that was more just a very economically left base, which, dare I say, that's a privileged position from a leftist, perspective, because you already have that foundation And for you, I know that you were talking about how it makes you happy to see a lot of this uprising taking place among us on the left. But I also imagine that it's a somber thought to see how this country is in late stage capitalism, but it's almost kind of like seeing a little kid that's sick and they're really under the weather. You see them sweating, they're achy, but you realize that this sickness that we call capitalism is at its late stages and it's about to pass, but you just got to keep them comfortable, keep giving them the medication that they need, and it will pass through. That's kind of like how I feel. I'm starting to understand it now, is that the usefulness of capitalism is gone. And so it's now become extremely repressive in nature because it's kind of shown its ugly face. See, back in the 50s, you know, we were showing a nice face to capitalism. We're like, oh, yeah, capitalism, this is happening. All right. Oh, you're white, I'm white too. Let's go out to the suburbs. Let's go and party.
I was going to say, at least white people were showing the nice face in the 50s, right?
Yeah. And now, and I hope some people don't take this wrong, but now a lot of white people are now starting to see what black people were seeing the entire time, the ugly face of capitalism.
That is so eloquently put, brother. It's sort of, that's part of our whole theory of reproletarianization and the revolutionary character of the proletariat. The issue with capitalism, it was progressive, like you said in the beginning, right? It grew the productive forces like crazy, but that ends, and it really got a shot in the arm around the sort of the greatest generation era. And this, they try to tell us is, you know, because the ruling class is just magnanimous, or they wanted to show solidarity with the white working class, which is completely untrue. They were forced to do this, right? By a militant working class and by the existence of the Soviet Union. And as they did it, they needed, in order for capitalism to continue going, to cut certain segments of the population off from leaving the proletariat and rising into a more middle class position. And they did this through redlining, through Jim Crow, the most brutal forms of racism. I mean, we could get into lynching and all of that. And at the time, we really only had the Communist Party, you know, struggling against lynching in an organized fashion. And the existence of this is one of the reasons that whole middle class was created. But now we're past that. The middle class is dying. And we're in this new era where everyone from those middle classes is falling down into the proletariat with us, but there's no longer an industrial base to absorb that. And so they're cut off from these relations of production that originally created the proletarian social consciousness in the first place. And this is what we call the re-proletariat. People stuck in low-wage service jobs, burdened by debt. And they're starting to see exactly what the Black community has been feeling all along. And where I differ from a lot of people and where the Institute differs is that we see this as an opportunity for solidarity like never before in American history. Whereas a lot of people are sort of looking for punishment, right? We want to move forward and make a better life for everyone.